another session of St. Charles at Home. And I'd like to welcome Patrick Morin, who is joining us today. Patrick, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks?
Hi, my name's Patrick Morin. I've lived here in Brooklyn for 11 years now. I've been a member of St. Charles for about 8 years. My wife and I were married there just over 3 years ago, and we had our first son, Luke, baptized there about a year ago. I'm a graphic designer here in Brooklyn. I work at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, just down the street from St. Charles in Fort Greene. It's America's oldest performing arts center. It started around the same time St. Charles did. The original home of BAM was actually just around the corner from St. Charles in Brooklyn Heights. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's delightful to be with you today.
Thanks. Yeah, I've yet to be back to St. Charles in person. Our family's still joining via Zoom, which has been a pretty great experience. It's like a new way to experience a faith community and experience Mass. But I'm excited to get back there in person soon, probably in September. We've been back and forth a little bit between here in Brooklyn and Massachusetts, where both of our families are. So,
okay.
Yeah, and then so it was great to join Mass via Zoom this past Sunday. I was excited to hear your homily, Monsignor. It's funny that the past 2 weeks, and the two Gospels, and you touched on this in the beginning of your homily. We can't look at this week's Gospel without looking at last week's. They come, session in the book of Matthew, and they're really when you think about it, the two most sort of iconic miracles in the Bible. It was the miracle of the loaves and fishes last week, and then this week, we see Christ walking on water. You see that these two stories, even in popular culture, have been parodied so much. When people talk about Jesus, these two stories come to mind. Of course, there's the stories of healing the sick and blind, but these two miracles, I think, speak to the faithful. But I think when I hear the non-believers often reference these two Gospels too. When you hear people sort of criticize Christ, they bring these up and say, Jesus is nothing but a magician. He's making loaves of bread and multiplying fish and walking on water, and they see it. They look at the act, but they don't look at the significance of the acts. And you, Monsignor, I think really touched on it in a different way that I'd ever considered it. I like how you talked about these moments as sort of a defining moment in the world. Like, this is a new way forward. Maybe you can kind of touch on that or sort of paraphrase that.
No, it's very true. It's interesting, Pat, that the two stories, the multiplication and the walking on the water, are the two that are actually contained in all of the gospel accounts. There aren't many incidents in Jesus's life where all four of them focus on them, but those two, all four focus on in the four traditions. And I think they do that, as I tried to say on Sunday, because they really represent an insight into the whole ministry of Jesus. That Jesus's ministry really was about bringing about God's new creation. And since it's asking you to step beyond into this new moment that God is bringing about through the death and resurrection of Jesus. But it's, as I tried to, it would, it's something we tend to take a step forward into. But then when we realize everything around us and all of the, how can I put it, the tensions and the distractions, we get like Peter and we start sinking.
Yeah.
And so, again, the other beautiful part of the stories is that Jesus is never going to let us sink. He reaches out and he pulls us up and says, okay, let's get in the boat. Let's go a little further. And maybe the next time you'll be willing to take even more steps. It's a great testimony to God's patience, which far exceeds anything we're capable of manifesting by way of patience. But it's, I think, but it does really say to you, this is a new moment. This is the opportunity when, if we're willing to embrace the will of God, we can create with God a new reality. The word that is most prominently used is new creation.
Yeah.
And that's a very challenging thing for us. It's interesting. I just finished last night reading an autobiography of John Lewis, the congressman. And it's Walking with the Wind. That's the title of it. But it's, again, you read that and you read through that whole history, of the civil rights movement, and how the steps were taken, at least attempted. And then you sit back and look at today and you say, obviously we were not willing and are still not willing to risk what it would be to create a society without racism, a society that would look to see the person, but not the, as Pope Francis, I love when he did this. He says, one of the issues we have in today's world is we have forgotten the use of nouns and emphasize the adjectives. And in a sense, that is so much of our problem, because we don't see the person, we see the adjectives of the person.
Right.
And that's how we then react. So the color of a person's skin rather than the person.
Right.
And so that's what where I see those two stories really, in a sense, challenging us to go forward, and particularly as church, challenging us to, in a sense, be the voice of that new creation by how we deal not only with one another, but how we deal in the world in which we live.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about, looking back at the civil rights movement and bringing that to today, and you talk about the courage or the strength. And then we look at that in the gospel, and we talk about faith, like to have the faith and courage, like that sort of correlation. I think about Peter in that boat, and he was the one of 12 to get out of the boat and actually go towards Christ. And I think about that. Is that, and you kind of brought this up, like it was almost like he was questioning Christ, but at the same time he had the faith to act. But at the same, like, it's like this.
It was very much. I mean, his initial remarks to Jesus are, prove to me that you're real.
Right.
Get me out of the boat and let me stand on the water.
Right. But he had the courage. So like courage and faith were this sort of combined.
Right. He had the courage to step out of the boat, but he also was looking for the reassurance.
Right.
That this figure in front of him was real.
Yeah. And
when you follow the rest of the scripture, particularly as it relates to Peter, there are continual scenes like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where Peter is testing, and yet at the same time, believing. There's the beautiful story of when they come down when they're in Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus asked them, "Who are the people saying that I am?" You know, and they give him all these different answers, and then Peter is the one who comes up and says, "No, you are the Christ." And then immediately following that, Jesus begins to explain what it means to be the Messiah.
Mm.
And Peter calls him off to the side and says, "Listen, I think you got it wrong. This idea of suffering and crucifixion, no, that's not what it's all about." And Jesus has to put him down by saying, "Get behind me, Satan."
Mm.
But it's that, how can I put it? It's that tension in Peter, because what you always see in Peter is the depth of his humanity. And that humanity is a mixed bag, as it is for any one of us. And yet the reality is that Jesus never gives up on him.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's always pulling him a little bit further into the mystery, into the action. And I think that's very much, again, how we come at it. Now, it's interesting, in the autobiography, at the very end, Lewis, and this goes back, it was written in '99, but at the end, it talks about how people ask him, how has he managed to remain in the movement? And I found it fascinating that his answer is prayer.
Yeah.
That's where he gets his strength from. And that's what keeps him moving, because he truly, in prayer, believes that there is this new reality that God is calling us to.
Yeah. Yeah. To think about like action, I always think of being a Catholic, where this sort of a church of action, we don't, just, it's not enough to sit and pray and read the Bible. You have to get out there and live as Christ taught us.
Yeah.
I think about, again, back to courage, like Peter had the courage again, and that's even given, from God, the gift of like free will to get out of the boat. Well, the other 11 sat there. Are they any less faithful for sitting there and witnessing Peter?
No, I don't think they are. And I think they were totally confused.
Yeah.
And terrified. I'm sure when they got in that boat, after he told them, you go in the boat, after the multiplication, the feeding of the 5,000, they had to be mystified. There's no way that they could have comprehended what went on.
Mm-hmm.
And in John's version of it, that is really lifted up in John's version of the story of the feeding of the thousands,
Mm-hmm.
because they're traveling with Jesus in the boat, okay? And he asks them if they have something to eat, and they get all crazy because, oh, he's mad at us because we forgot to bring anything along with us.
Right.
This is after he fed thousands, and he looks at them and he says, "You didn't understand. You didn't comprehend what we just did." In the sense of, it had to be, and I think for us, they were not much different than we are. So it had to be, what is this all about? What's happening here? How is this guy able to take 5 loaves and 2 fish, feed 5,000 plus,
Mm-hmm.
and have 12 baskets left over after that when we pick up the remnants? Logically, you'd sit there, that's an impossibility. It couldn't possibly have happened. But yet it did happen.
Right.
It was so integral to the life of the early church that all 4 gospels capture it.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, this must have been an event that truly spoke to them about the reality of Jesus. It just wasn't, he wasn't just another ordinary preacher.
Right.
But there was something more going on here. And again, as you come to understand that, the church came to understand that, they recognize that this is, again, God not abandoning his people, and God nourishing his people. And we look at it today as a prelude to the Eucharist. Because when you think about the Eucharist, it's the same thing. We celebrate the Eucharist at St. Charles. We participate in the Eucharist, but we're not participating in something that is exclusive to St. Charles.
Right.
At the same time that we're participating in that, people throughout the world are participating in the same Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, in a sense, you get the sense of the power of God to draw people together into the oneness of Jesus's life.
Mm-hmm.
But that also opens the door to that new reality.
Right.
We're all part of this one person. Well, then we're intimately connected to one another.
Yeah.
We're dependent upon one another, just as the different parts of our body are dependent
Right.
on how we function.
Yeah. Think about these disciples too, and they're, witnessing Christ in the flesh, amongst them, even when he's this sort of ghostly figure on the sea, he's still a peer, and then today, like Christ isn't always, as visible, sometimes it's hidden, and we need to find sort of Christ on the metaphorical rough seas,
Mm-hmm.
and for them to even question it, when he's right there amongst them. You think about today, how much more faith and courage it takes to find Christ in these sort of rough seas.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's another very interesting scene in the scriptures, and it comes it's actually in Luke, and it comes in his recollection of the ascension, Jesus' ascension into heaven. And they're all standing there at the mountainside, looking up to heaven as Jesus is ascending. And Jesus is still looking. And the angel comes to them and says, "What are you looking up there for? He's in front of you." In the sense that if we believe in the incarnation, which is the essence of our faith, and the fact that we are one in the Lord through the gift of the Eucharist, then Jesus is present because he's present through us. So we have to learn to see Jesus in each other.
Right.
And that becomes certainly an issue of great courage and great faith.
Right.
To really believe that that's the reality in which we live. Certainly the mission of the church has been about that.
Right.
That's why you look at the great stories of the saints, you look at the great stories of the missionaries, when they go to these different places, and you say, why would they do that? What? Because again, they're serving Christ, they're seeing Christ in the people to whom they're going.
Right. And you sort of ended your homily in that. You said, Christ is challenging us, like to go forward to this new creation, and it's in that we're seeing Christ in other people. That's the new way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Really like how he sort of wrapped it all together like that.
Yeah, and I see Michael coming in on the top of our screen, which I think he's indicating to us that it's time for us to pull this together. So it's been a great pleasure having this conversation with you. I'm always amazed that people pay that much attention to the homilies I give.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Monsignor. Look forward to many more homilies in the future in person,
Yep.
if not on Zoom.
Yep. Well, hopefully, Pat, come September, we'll get there.
Yeah,
This will be a passing moment in our history.
exactly. All
Great.
right.
But you take care, you and the family, and stay well.
You as well.
Thank you.
Panis angelicus, fit panis hominum,